This is the answer to a question from the person who asked, during your teenage years, did you have any other interests besides music? Well, before I became good enough at guitar for it to be interesting to me for 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day or whatever, when I was first starting to learn, it was kind of, it seemed like there would only be a couple hours of things to do a day or whatever, and at that point it seems like I used to spend a lot of time playing video games, but that stopped when, that was at the age of like 12 or 13, but that stopped when I was 14, and I got a 4-track, and I was becoming better at figuring things out off of records, and I also, as far as other interests, I guess I used to watch a lot of movies. I think I used to watch Blue Velvet a lot, and Eraserhead a lot, and Woody Allen movies, and John Waters movies, and who else? And I used to watch Clockwork Orange a lot. I think that's it, nothing else. Oh, I guess I used to read philosophy books like Nietzsche and Krishnamurti and Schopenhauer. But other than that, it was just guitar. I guess you could call eating candy an interest. That was something I was very interested in. I ate a lot of lemon heads. This is in response to the person who says, John, are you aware that your music helps and inspires people? If so, how do you feel about it? Well, yeah, I suppose people say it to me a lot, and it feels good to be of some sort of help to people. I know that the musicians that I respect really have just saved my life throughout my life over and over again. They've, musicians as well as visual artists have, as well as, I suppose actors and actresses have made it possible for me to get through periods of my life that I can't imagine having gotten through without those things. And my images of those people are some of my main sources of happiness. So I'm glad that I could be of some use to other people, and this person asks, how do you choose the songs you cover, as you have covered a wide variety of genres of music? I guess, one of the main reasons I play guitar and sing is just because I enjoy doing it, so, and because I listen to so much music that to do it is just, for me, what comes from being inspired by listening to music. I guess you're talking about the songs that I've covered in my live performances, because I haven't covered that many songs on record, at least as a solo artist. But I guess live in the Chili Peppers, I also cover things. I really don't know. I guess different ones come about different ways. Big Takeover by the Bad Brains, which I did on my first solo record, was when I used to come home from rehearsal with the Chili Peppers in a taxi cab, when we were writing the Blood Sugar Sex Magic album, I got in the habit of singing punk rock songs to myself in a melodic, sort of slow way. And I would do this pretty much every day because I didn't bring a CD player with me or anything. I was just sitting in silence in the car, so it was my way of listening to music, was to sing to myself or sing in my head. And one that seemed to work really well was Big Takeover by Bad Brains, so I decided to do a version of it on my 4-track with a mandolin, sort of trying to do a sort of a Battle of Evermore treatment on it. And let's see, like, I guess when I sing things live in the Chili Peppers, something like I Feel Love by Donna Summer, which I was doing just because I really love Donna Summer, and I love those records so much, and Flea knew how to play that bass line, and so it seemed like a good idea to perform it. And in the case of all the songs that I did during my solo shows for the last record, they're just all songs that really mean a lot to me, and they were songs that were within my range of capability to be able to sing them. You know, I suppose sometimes I get ideas of songs, I get ideas to cover songs, but it just doesn't suit me or doesn't fit my voice or whatever. And sometimes it does. But I guess it's always just music that I love a lot. I guess some of the stuff that I remember covering was Bauhaus, Bauhaus song All We Ever Wanted, and Joy Division, New Dawn Fades, and REM Country Feedback, and these are all just songs that really, I guess they especially meant a lot to me during a period in my life where I felt very alone, and I suppose as I was coming out into the world more, it felt good to express that part of me, which is actually also the same reason I write lyrics about the way I was feeling back at that time. The question is, what ambitions do you have for the future with your music and in your music with the Chili Peppers? I'm not really big on having ambitions, and I never have been, but I think you just mean if I have any plans, and I really don't have any plans other than in the immediate future. I don't feel comfortable talking about it. I suppose this is in response to, is there anybody in particular you would absolutely love to make a song with, like you did with Tricky a while back? There are definitely a lot of people, but I enjoy being in the position of being a fan. It doesn't really occur to me, like I might like Stereolab or somebody, but the thought doesn't occur to me that I would ever do anything with them. I'm just a fan. I have worked with a couple of people recently who it means a great deal to me to have worked with. I recorded something with Michael Rother, who is my friend in Germany, who used to be in the group Neu and has made a lot of great solo records, and we've done some stuff together. And Eckhard Ehlers, who's also a German, he's an experimental electronic artist, and I think he's one of the best people making music in the world. So we've been doing this sort of collaborative thing, which has been really fun. And I suppose I'm just interested in taking it as it comes. Again, I don't have any goals or ambitions other than just make a lot of music. Okay, this is in response to the question, would you give us a brief summary of when the individual songs on Niandra and Smile were recorded? Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of Smile sitting around here, and but Niandra, As Can Be, was written while we were in the house where we recorded Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and recorded probably on a weekend when I went back to my house because we didn't work on weekends. My Smile's a Rifle was while we were, that was while we were writing the record. Head, Beach Arab was written when I was 16 years old, and it was originally written as a heavy metal song, and I did the version of it that I did on Niandra. Just went a different direction with it. That was also recorded probably pretty early on in the writing process of Blood Sugar. Big Takeover was also recorded during the writing. Curtains was at that time my only song I had written on piano, and that was written during the writing of it. Running Away Into You was recorded after I had quit the band. I think it might be the only song that was on this album that was recorded after I quit the band. I probably recorded it about a month after I quit or something. Mascara was while we were writing, and the day after I recorded that song, I met the Mascara Snake from Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band, and I think that's why I called it Mascara. I felt that there was some kind of connection between the experience of meeting him and the lyrics to the song. Been Insane was recorded during the writing of it. Skin Blues was recorded during the writing of it. Your Pussy's Glued to a Building on Fire was written at the house where we recorded Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and recorded on a weekend when I went back to my house. Blood on My Neck from Success was just before I quit the band, and the lyrics were pretty much a sort of an assault on our manager, Lindy Getz, at the time. He's a real nice guy. I don't mean anything bad to him, but at the time I felt like I was, like I was being pushed around and told what to do, and that my relationship with my art was suffering from this drive to be successful by everybody else. Tender Butter Blood Voodoo was recorded during the writing of it, and I seem to remember being pretty happy at that time. I believe that I remember being on heroin when I played the guitar solo. Usually just a t-shirt was recorded in the order that it appears on the record, so the earliest things on it were recorded during the writing process of Blood Sugar, and the last things recorded on it were just before I quit the band. And I always I think it's interesting in that you can hear the decline that I was going on inside. I think that those last two songs on it are the best songs on the record, but at the same time, it's very sad because I hear when I hear it that it sounds like a person falling apart, or it sounds like somebody about to kill themselves or something. Those songs are sad for the same reason that they're good. So I'm proud that I went through it, and I'm proud that those songs are what they are. I think I would say that last song, I know at the time I thought of it as the direction that I thought my music could go outside of the band if I hadn't stopped playing music at that point. And if a close friend of mine who played the upright bass hadn't died. All the songs on Niandra LaDes were all recorded in my living room at 8505 Hollywood Boulevard, at Hollywood Boulevard and Kings Road in the Hills. yeah, everything was recorded in the living room. The film this is in response to the question, is there any way we could see the film by Tony Oswald about you, the one from which the cover of Niandra LaDes is taken? Could you tell us about it? She definitely finished the film just recently, and it had remained unedited for a long time, but it was made at that period of time, around 1992, I guess, or 93, and I guess 92, and it's a film inspired by the ideas of Marcel Duchamp. That she was with me when we were touring in Europe for Blood Sugar Sex Magik, and I guess I was sitting there doing a lot of thinking, and she was always writing in her notebook, and she was coming up with this idea for this movie. And so I was playing Marcel Duchamp's alter ego, Rose Salavi, as well as somebody who pushes her out of a door with another friend of mine. The film was just shown recently at the Viper Room. They had a film night and they showed that. And I don't know if there will ever be any sort of a release of it or anything. Let's see, this is in response to the question, what bottle do you carry around during all the Funky Monks video, and why do you brush your teeth so much? That period of my life, which was the happiest time that I had experienced up to that point when we lived at that house, it was the first time in my life I'd ever brushed my teeth as much as I did then. I should have continued doing it after that, but that was probably the only time in my life I really obsessed on brushing my teeth, and I highly recommend brushing your teeth to anybody. It's the best thing to do, and you'll inevitably regret it if you don't. And the bottle I would carry around all the time is I used to drink a lot of coconut and pineapple juice, I think by Nutson's, and I also used to drink, I guess that's the taste that I associate with that period of time of making Blood Sugar Sex Magik, was drinking that coconut pineapple juice all the time. And what else would I drink? I guess, I would drink like cranberry juice. Oh, and there was also, she used to buy this pineapple coconut banana juice that was also good. Or no, just maybe pineapple banana. And do you have any albums that were never released from after you quit the band? If so, would you ever think about making it available to fans, possibly through the internet? No, The Smile from the Streets You Hold is the album, that had some recordings from that period of time, and there weren't any recordings from after I quit the band aside from those that appear on Smile from the Streets You Hold. And that album only has like 4 or 5 songs that were recorded at that time. I find that I find that every time I listen to your music, I feel or experience something new. If you had to choose one band or musician that has had a similar effect upon your life, who would it be? I guess the people that stick out in my mind are Mark Bolan from T-Rex, and Lou Reed and David Bowie. Those people, and Iggy Pop as well. Those people seem to, and the best of the music that they've made has stuck with me since I was a kid, and I still am constantly getting new things out of it. As I suppose I do with anybody I like, but those 3 people really stick out. And I guess other than that, I just go through phases where this person or that person really has a big effect on who I am. Right now, as I've said, Peter Hamill from Joy Division and John Cale, and what did I say? Peter Hamill from Joy Division, Peter Hamill from Vandergraaf Generator, and Nico and John Cale. They seem to be my favorite people at the moment. Oh, and Cat Stevens is my favorite at the moment as well. Was wondering what the chances of the side project you, Flea, and Omar did ever getting released. We haven't done it yet, but it will definitely get released once it gets done. But at the moment, we've just had conflicting schedules and things. But I've recorded a great deal of music with Omar on his solo record that's going to be a soundtrack to a film that he made starring Jeremy Ward, and I'm really proud of that music. We've done some really mind-blowing music for that, as well as made some good recordings on this 8-track at his house that are also really good. But basically him and me and Flea just wrote 3 songs together while we were touring together, and we're going to record them hopefully sometime in April or May, probably May. This question was basically, do you plan on releasing an album with all the new material you were coming up with at the performance shows? No, we have no plans of making an album of those things yet, except for shows 3 and 4, which we did make a record of. But we definitely would like to do an album of experimental stuff, but we've just been making other music. Since you recorded roughly 30 songs for By the Way, any chance you and the guys have ever contemplated releasing a double CD ever in the future? Well, we did contemplate making By the Way a double CD, which I actually think would have been a really good idea, but it was decided that we would just make a really long single CD. To me, some of the best songs for By the Way were released only as B-sides, which only came out overseas. But eventually I hope that to put all these B-sides onto one record, and that'll definitely be done one of these days. This question is, what is your advice for someone who is starting out as a guitarist, and how do you suggest they play, and what is the most crucial aspect of playing or developing? Well, for me, what I notice is just the most important thing is that a person really loves music, There's lots of ways of going about playing guitar, a person can learn, I strongly recommend learning songs from records, and for me that's how I began, was by learning as much music as I could off of records, and eventually developing a sort of a vocabulary based on the words that I had learned, the musical words that I had learned through learning things on my guitar off of records. It was slow getting into it, but I suppose I started out with things that were more simple, like punk rock and new wave, and I eventually, was moving on to the guitarists of the 60s and progressive rock and art rock and things like that, and to the point now where pretty much anything that I want to know how to play, I can learn how to play it, and it's what keeps me going still. And it's big source of where ideas come from for me. I also think that while a person can definitely go their whole lives without learning theory and things like that, I think that that it can be a mind opener, and I think it only closes somebody's mind if they're that type of person. I think if you use theoretical information the same way that jazz musicians like Charles Mingus or John Coltrane or people like that use it. A lot of the time you learn rules so you break them with finesse, you know. I'd rather break rules, you know, because I have some sort of an interesting way of breaking the rules rather than break them because I don't know what I'm doing. You know, for me, I like to see music in terms of color, and to me, understanding theory is just giving names to those colors, and once you've got a grasp on it, you can see all the different ways that you can bend those rules. And so I think it's a big help, and I'm glad that I learned those things when I was a teenager. But it's important to never get caught up in the physical aspects of being a guitarist, because while it's important to get your physical technique together, it's important to understand that this has nothing to do with music, and that music is only the sound of it, and music is not what it looks like when you play it on the guitar. And this is something that I couldn't get through my head when I was a teenager. It wasn't until I was about 20 that I had the, you know, realization completely, which, you know, people had said to me for years, but it had never really clicked in my head until I remember one day listening to Television's album Marquee Moon and just realizing that it was the sound of what was coming out that mattered, and that the actual physical things that were taking place on the neck of the guitar had no importance whatsoever. And especially thinking about people like Keith Richards and how effective their playing is and how simple it is, this all clicked and has forever stayed firm in my brain that it's the colors you create with your instrument that's important, and not physically what you're doing. Who is your all-time biggest musical influence? I don't know. It's really hard to say. I mean, when I remember, you know, how much Jimi Hendrix meant to me when I was a little kid. I don't know if anybody's ever meant more to me than that. You know, so I'd probably pick him, even though I think I don't see my playing now as being very influenced by him. Although I suppose it is. You know, I drew so much from him between the ages of 12 to 22 that I tried to sort of come up with a new direction for myself when I started playing guitar again when I was 28, when I rejoined the band. And so I felt like, especially because my fingers weren't very strong at that point, I felt like, okay, if I try to sound like Jimi Hendrix now, I'm just going to sound ridiculous, because I had lost all the strength that you need in your fingers to sound like that. So I chose to focus on guitar players that were that had less technical ability than that and less strength in their fingers, like Matthew Ashman and Bernard Sumner and Robert Smith and The Cure and these people's guitar playing. I chose to develop a style more based out of what these people were doing, and it's been really interesting to me since then. I've developed all kinds of directions from that point, and but you know, in a lot of ways, in my head, Jimi Hendrix still seems like the sort of purest form of a human being being one with their music. And I think when I realized this when I was 12, it really hit me very strongly. Before that, I'd had a friend in school who liked Jimi Hendrix a lot, and I would argue with him saying that the Sex Pistols were much more important to musical history than Jimi Hendrix. This is when I'm in like 4th grade or something. And he would play me Jimi Hendrix at lunchtime, and I would play him the Sex Pistols and the Circle Jerks and things like this. But but once I started playing guitar, I bought a Jimi Hendrix record, and I was just, I just can't remember ever being so excited about music as I was at that point. This question is, do you ever watch movies, read, or just see something and get inspired to write a song based on it? I think usually, a lot of the time when I read something, it finds its way into my music. I read a book about Aleister Crowley recently, and that definitely found its way into a couple of my songs. And reading about him in the past has also affected my songs. I'm falling through a mirror. Yeah, all that stuff in time goes back. I'm flowing through a mirror and almost disappearing. That's from when Aleister Crowley would talk about looking in the mirror and sort of mentally forcing himself to disappear while he was looking in the mirror. He would actually see his physical body fade and fade and fade until it was just a faint little flickering hint of a body. Into a line of one of my songs, or I'll just be writing a song and a certain something that I read will pop into my head, or an image that came to me from a movie or whatever will come into my head, and I'll write about it. That's the Aleister Crowley one. Seems like something that's come up from time to time. I know he's found his way into others of my songs as well. This is in response to the question: are there any painters? What painters are inspiring to you besides Marcel Duchamp and God, that's a fucking question. This question is there anywhere I can see more of your paintings? Most of my paintings burned during the fire at my house in 1994, I guess. And that was most of them. That was most of the good ones. There was a stack of paintings that a girl who was a friend of mine named Andrea, she took them and she was going to sell a couple to a friend of mine, and she did sell a couple, and then she never gave me back the rest. And so hopefully she still has them. I'm always thinking maybe one day I'll run into her and we'll have those, but really God knows what she did with them. Because I don't speak to her anymore. Who are some of your favorite artists besides Duchamp, Basquiat, and Da Vinci? I suppose, I like all the artists of the Surrealists and the Dadaists. Max Ernst and I like the Cubist painters a lot, like Braque and Picasso's early things, and I love Vincent van Gogh's things a lot. I love Cy Twombly, and I love Francis Picabia's stuff that he did in the 19-teens, the mechanical paintings and drawings. Those things, along with Marcel Duchamp's drawings, are probably my favorite works of art by anybody ever. And the ones definitely that I relate to the most. Also, Don Van Vliet, also known as Captain Beefheart's paintings, have always spoken to me a great deal. I love those very much. This question is, do you have to be depressed to write a sad song? Do you have to be in love to write a love song? No, I find that I get in touch with those kind of emotions very much just by being in a certain kind of state of mind. Like a song that I wrote called Dying Song, which is one of the sadder songs that I've ever written, was written just because I had just seen a Björk concert when she was playing here with a full orchestra, and the guys from Matmos and a person playing harp, and it was just one of the most beautiful things I ever heard. And I just came home and I sat down and just in that inspired state of mind that I was in, I just tried to write something that seemed on a par with that in terms of beauty. I was just trying to write something that was beautiful, and to me, sad songs are always the most beautiful songs. So, you know, it's and also sometimes I would say when I write, I'm almost writing like an actor or something. It usually turns out that what I'm writing about is something that I felt at a certain point in my life. I suppose at the times in my life that I've been very sad, it was hard for me I wasn't able to write music, but now I write music directly from the state of mind that I was in at the period of life when I was sad, but I'm writing it now from the state of mind of being somebody who's in general very happy. I've definitely written a lot of love songs while I've been in love with people, but and I don't like to pretend. So it seems like if I do write something like that and I'm not currently in love with somebody, it's probably the same thing where I'm at least writing in terms of writing from some kind of memory. I definitely think it's important for writing songs to have experience in life. I don't believe that somebody who's never truly been sad could write a truly sad song. And I don't believe that somebody who's never been in love would be able to write a beautiful love song. To me, you have to really have felt things to be able to write about them succinctly. The question is, during your time away from the Chili Peppers, did you ever think you would get back together with them and that things would be as successful as they are now? If not, how does it feel? Well, it crossed my mind that things were going to happen, but I sort of pretended not to notice. But I suppose most things that have happened to me in my life at some point or another, I was warned that they were going to happen. So nothing is ever surprising to me. But at the same time as, you know, at the same time things are, but the thing is, when I would think about it logically, where Anthony and Flea and Chad were at during the period of time that I wasn't in the band, and where I was at, it wouldn't have made logical sense to me that we would ever be on the same page, because their direction in their life seemed so completely on another planet to me. I mean, they just, to me, they seemed very sort of like just going in a meaningless direction and being kind of out of touch. And same thing with Dave Navarro. They just seemed they just seemed on another planet to me. And I think in my own way, I was also out of touch, but in a different way. I was just not a clear version of myself at that period of time, and I think I probably was on a sort of I think I definitely overestimated my own importance in terms of the universe during the period of time that I was on drugs, but that's something that cocaine just does to you, and I was on a lot of cocaine all the time. But I think once I stopped taking drugs, and once they were not playing with Dave Navarro anymore, we seemed to be on the same page of our lives at the same time, even though we had both been through all this other, we had both led completely separate lives for a few years. Somehow we seemed to be on the same page, and that was the only point where my conscious mind would acknowledge, okay, it seems like I'm probably going to be in the Chili Peppers here. And as far as success, I've never made any demands upon fate in terms of that. I just take things as they come. This question is, do you have an utmost favorite guitar track that you love to play more than any other? I guess you mean of my own music. And I thought that instrumental number 1 that was a B-side on the Scar Tissue single, I think that's really good guitar playing of mine, but it's not something that we've ever played again. I guess on guitar, what I get the most enjoyment out of doing from time to time, over and over again, is just to improvise. It's playing songs is fun for a while when you can reinterpret them different ways, but sometimes when you play the same songs over and over for years and years, it starts to become confusing as far as you feel. You get to a point where you feel like the interesting things you can do to it, you've already kind of done them all. But even then, it sometimes feels that way at the end of a tour, but then a year later you go on tour again and you have a completely new way of approaching it. So that's the way that is. Are there any plans for you to come to England to perform any of your solo stuff in the near future? Not in the near future, but I would definitely love to. Once I have some time to, I guess after the cycle of the next Chili Peppers album and tour, I would imagine after that I'll do a proper tour in England. But actually, yeah, I'll definitely come to England at that time if that's what I do, which I think it is. Do you think people downloading music for free or not buying it is as big of a problem as people say? I don't know. I don't know much about the internet, and I really don't have any sort of a definitive opinion on these things. I hear different people with opposite opinions speaking, and a lot of the time they both make sense to me. I hear some people saying that they love record stores a lot, and that if the internet gets too big, then record stores are just going to die out, and that's a pretty horrifying thought to me. But at the same time, I have other friends who say, that whatever way things go, that's the way things go, and people just have to get used to it, and that people will always want to support the bands that they really like, and that the people who are successful, who this supposedly hurts, they already have enough money, and it's kind of silly to be going around defending millionaires because they have only $4 million dollars now instead of $8 million or whatever. To me, that's also a good point, is that who are we really protecting here? People who like independent small bands will always buy albums by those people because it's the people who like that kind of music feel strongly about it, and those are really the bands that need to be supported, and these huge bands like Metallica, so what if they sell, 8 million records instead of 13 million records or whatever? It's not the end of the world, So I actually don't really have my own opinion on these things, but these are things that I've heard people say that did make sense to me, and I've heard a lot of people say things that make no sense to me. Do you plan to play some new stuff with the Peppers on the coming European tour? I would imagine we're only going to do a couple of weeks of rehearsal, so we'll probably have come up with ideas at that point, but the concept of playing a full song, it is possible, but it seems unlikely to me. But I really don't know until we're in there at rehearsal. This question is, can you tell us meanings or inspiration behind some of your new songs? I guess most of these songs on Shadows Collide with People were mostly written out of some kind of happiness, I suppose. There's some exceptions, but I've, in general, I've been pretty happy to be alive last few years, and even when I write sad songs, it seems like they come out of this sort of clear state of mind that comes from basically feeling good about myself and about things. But I guess something like they're probably mostly written out of an interest in music, from listening to music that inspires me, and the direction that it goes emotionally has probably more to do with what chords I'm interested in figuring out something to do with, more so than like minor chords because I'm feeling sad or major chords because I'm feeling happy. But I've, in my life there's been so much extreme sadness. I'd say especially during the few years that I wasn't in the band, extreme loneliness or extreme sadness or just extreme complete disconnection from the world, that those emotions are still very much a part of me, and so I think when I write songs, those things go into them. And I think a lot of what I end up writing about in my lyrics has as much to do with the way I was feeling, in 1995 or whatever, as it does with how I'm feeling now. That time is certainly what gives it depth. The next question is, were all these songs written around the same time? The earliest ones are Second Walk was written around the same time as some of the last songs that were written for To Record Only Water. This Cold is probably a similar period of time. Second Walk, I was listening to R.E.M. a lot at the time, and same thing with This Cold. I think both of those songs were written in Japan around the same time. Wednesday's song was also written in Japan, and that was when we were touring for By the Way. That was one of the last songs written for Shadows Collide with People. We were actually already in the middle of recording it. We recorded part of it, and then I went out on tour, and oh wait, that's not true. I guess it was right before we recorded it, and I was on tour in Japan. And Song of Singing I'm Lonely was when we were touring for Californication, and Relief was written in England right before we started. Right before we started writing By the Way, when I was there to promote my To Record Only Water for 10 days. The rest of them were written, I can't remember what year it was, but I seem to remember sometime getting off tour sometime around September, having a couple of months of not much, and then starting writing a lot of songs around November, and then and then the songwriting continuing all the way up until making the record. There was a lot of, when you talk about the difference in emotion on the album, there was also a lot of songs that were much more sad than the songs on here. I actually tried to keep it in general kind of uplifting, but with the intention of having a good amount of variety regardless. But there's a lot of very sad songs that I'd written around the time that just didn't require drums, so that was the main reason why they weren't on the record. And those will be on an album at a later date. Can you tell me something about the process of how you pick a certain guitar for a certain piece of music? I guess I've been a big fan of playing guitar along with records and playing the kind of guitar that the person who I'm playing along with is playing. So if I'm learning something by Robert Fripp, I'd like to play a Les Paul, and if I'm playing something by Bernard Sumner, I'd play an SG, and if I was playing something, by Matthew Ashman, I'd play my Gretsch White Falcon. So you start to sort of associate certain styles of playing with certain guitars. I guess for me, the Jaguar is one of the more colorful guitars that I have, because the vibrato bar on it is the best one that I've ever felt, and you can make string noise from behind the bridge and from behind the nut, and there's lots of tonal differences, and there's just something about it that feels a certain way to me. It feels very purple to me or something, and I can. For me, that's my most fun guitar out of all of them. So I think the reason I play it at the performance shows a lot is because those shows are all about, for me, having fun, and that's the funnest guitar I have. The SG is good for kind of heavy metal things. Although now that I just bought a Les Paul recently, and now that I have that, I would imagine I'll probably use that a lot for heavy metal type things as well. But an SG makes me think of like Tony Iommi or somebody who gets a really great sound for heavy metal that way. And it's also good for punk too. For punk, like a Stratocaster through distortion pedal isn't really the best way to go. So, but in general, I guess I try to get a lot out of using just a small amount of guitars. I suppose when I make an album, it's usually one or two guitars that I'm using on it. And definitely between a guitar with humbuckers and a guitar with single coils, you can get a great deal of variety. Somebody asked, what do I want? What did I get for my birthday? Well, I think my favorite present was my friend Wendy gave me a single of her, a vinyl single of her band Emily Sassy Lime, which made me really happy. And let's see, what else did I get? Johnny Ramone gave me 2 Humphrey Bogart lobby cards from the movie The Two Miss Carols with Barbara Stanwyck. And I didn't really get much presents this year, really. Let's see. I got a very nice letter from Josh. Josh and I haven't been giving each other presents lately, so he wrote me a really nice letter that was probably, along with the 7-inch from Wendy, was probably my favorite thing that I got. And my dad gave me a box set of Wagner and a couple of Joan Baez albums, and my mom gave me some kitchen supplies. That was it. Not too many people really even knew it was my birthday, I don't think. I know Flea bought me something, but I haven't gotten it yet. We don't see each other much, and he lives pretty far away now. He lives all the way in Malibu, and I live in Hollywood, so... Oh, and Anthony gave me some flowers and a nice little note, which was also really made me feel good, that I saved, along with the note from Josh. And the flowers, that was nice. They made me feel good. And I think that's it. And this person asks, I would like to know whether your belief in God has any effect on the music you write. Do you think God inspires you at all? This is one of the few questions where the person's name is at the end of it, Joe Finstrom. When I do this in the future, it would be nice if people put their name at the end of their letter, because otherwise I don't see it. He wants to know whether my belief in God has had any effect. I don't believe in God or anything. To me, God is a concept that helps people, It's a concept that makes people more comfortable with being alive and with getting through life. And it's a concept which causes people to be more moral than they would otherwise, because there's this invisible sort of threat behind the possibility of dying and not going to heaven. And I think that's all really, really good stuff. I personally don't need any kind of threats to be moral. It's always been just my nature to be kind to people and to do all those things that the Bible recommends that you do. I do them purely because that's the way I am. It's not because I'm afraid that I'm going to go to hell if I don't do them. And I'm like, I'm sure if I felt a void in myself, or I felt some sort of need to search for some kind of meaning or something like that, then I would maybe I'd go after God, as a way to fill it, or as a way to find what I was searching for. But I'm not really searching for anything, and I'm really in amazement constantly at the world as it is, and I think it's incredible just exactly the way it is. And I think there's lots of other worlds that are incredible too, in different ways. And I'm just really lucky to be in this one, and I look forward to being in other ones in the future. And there seems to be obviously a deep intelligence that runs through everything, but I don't think of it as being one person or something. I just think of it as being the order of the universe. It's to me, when people say God, it kind of sounds like they're talking about one, person who invented everything or something. That doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think it ever has. But no offense, like I said, I mean in all sincerity that I really think God is a great concept to help people, and I think it does a really good job. Okay, this question is coming from somebody named Mark Wilson, and they're asking about the subject of first takes and things, and they were saying, I was just wondering if your solo music has ever come up in this way. Somehow they know that Omar and I improvised this Cicatrice solo in 4 takes, and we took the 3rd take. Omar and I are both very impressed that you know that, because none of us, to our memory, have ever said that in an interview, but it is true that it was the 3rd take. I guess, at the time of my first album, I don't think there's anything, vocals or music, that wasn't a first take. It was very unusual for something to not be a first take. And the same thing with the Blood Sugar Sex Magic album. All the solos, all the parts, they're always whatever the guitar parts are always what I played when I when we did the basic tracks with the drums, and the guitar solos were always first takes. I guess there were situations where there was a second take, but it was, my memory of it is that it was all first takes. And Californication was pretty similar, but I think I was probably I probably had less of an idea of what I was doing upon going into the studio. Whereas with Blood Sugar, I really knew the basic approach for every solo. I knew how I was going to start and how I was going to end and that kind of thing. So doing it in first takes was, partially due to that. I guess on an album like By the Way, I was coming up with so many layered kind of guitar parts while we were recording it, because that was the only time where I would really have the opportunity to see how one guitar part would go on top of another guitar part and things like that. Sometimes I'd work things out when I was at home, but a lot of the time there was a certain amount of experimentation in the studio. So I think once I'm clear on what I'm going to do as far as a certain part, then it's the first take after that. But I guess on that album, it was a lot about coming up with parts that worked in some kind of a textural way against the music rather than like improvising or something like that, It was more coming up with some fancy high thing that goes with the chords in a certain way and figuring out new ways of voicing the chords and things like that. So that's all a kind of a mental exercise. For Shadows Collide with People, guitar parts that I played with the drums or the guitar parts that we kept and that kind of thing. And I guess with the solos for that one, I was doing a thing where I would just kind of play a couple of solos and pick out the best ones, and they were always, the first takes was always keepable, but for whatever reason at the time I just wanted to have a few options and to just take a completely different approach for a few solos and just see which one's the best. So, so we would do like 3 or something. Lately I've been very much in that first take mode. The music that I've recorded since Shadows Collide with People has been very, very, very first take oriented on everything, from the drums through the guitars through the vocals and everything, except except those things that we didn't have planned out to begin with, that you just have to mess around for a little while. But let's say like coming up with a bass line or something. Like Josh and I just rehearse with drums and guitar, so when it comes to coming up with a bass line, it's something we just do in the studio. And sometimes like the other day I made up a bass line while I was recording it, and that was what we kept. So situations like that happen, but sometimes you got to fiddle about for a little bit. But I highly I think you're doing the right thing. To me, it's important to record quickly. To me, the best music happens quickly, and to me, the best periods of time for music, like in the 50s and in the 60s, and I think even a great deal of the records recorded in the 70s were all recorded very quickly. And to me, when you put that kind of pressure on yourself, I think it pushes you to be better, and it creates a kind of an excitement on the record that people who do take after take will just never have. So first takes forever. This question is from Amy, and the question is, what is the process you go through when writing a song? Do the words, melody, or harmony come to you first, or all at the same time? It always happens a little differently, but in general the process is I'm either playing guitar or I'm listening to a record, and an idea comes to me, whether it's some sort of a technical observation I've made about the record I'm listening to, or a technical observation I make about some chords that I'm playing, or it's just I stumble upon something and it sounds good to me. And the second I get the notion that there's a possibility that it could become a song, I get my mini disc player, the same one that I'm talking to you right now through, and I I come up with what I sing a melody over what I'm playing, more as just, excited about the chords that I'm playing, or maybe the melody was part of the original idea, and I try to think of some. I'm usually singing some kind of nonsense syllables, and then I find words to fit those syllables, and then I sing those words. I open up my notebook, take my pencil out. I never write with school pencils, and I also never write songs with pens. And I write in my notebook. My notebooks are always like art notebooks, like white pages, no lines. And I open up the book, and I write down the first line, and then I press record on the tape recorder. I sing the first line while playing the guitar. Then I stop the mini disc recorder. I think about what the next line's going to be, and I just sort of try to follow a feeling from the beginning to the end. I just record it one line at a time, while constantly playing the whole thing to myself and seeing where that takes me. If I'm stuck at a certain point, I don't know what to do next. I just go back to the beginning and play the whole song to myself, and by the time I get to the part that I had left off at, the next part just comes, and so usually it just flows from the beginning to the end, and sometimes a song can be written in a few minutes, but more normally it takes a couple hours of just refining things and making changing little things about the lyrics to make it make more sense or whatever, and refining the melody and things like that, and also getting a grasp on how to sing it, because when you first come up with something, you're a little goofy on pronouncing the syllables and things like that, and you're not used to singing the melody, and you get more used to it, and the song starts to come alive the more you play it. And usually when I write a song that's really good, I know it's good because I just want to play it over and over. And the next day I can't wait to listen to it and to play it again. So those songs usually end up becoming better than others just because I play them more times, and the melodies start, and the way I'm singing it starts to really take on another life. So in response to the second part of the question, I guess it all comes to me at once, but it's pretty rare that the vocal melody or the words will come first in that moment. I mean, it all happens during the course of one sitting, but I think the first thing that sets it off is usually the guitar, or the guitar and the voice together. This question is, don't you think it's interesting that Bob Forrest discovered both you and Josh Klinghoffer, and now you and Josh are really great friends? What does Bob think of this? Yeah, neither of us are very close friends with Bob these days, but I wouldn't say that Bob discovered me. I guess it's partially true, but Flea was the first person who I came into contact with in that world, and he told Bob about me, so I guess that would mean that Flea actually discovered me. But although he discovered me, I guess he didn't like me well enough to ask me to be in the Chili Peppers until Bob asked me to be in Thelonious Monster. So I'm definitely indebted to Bob. I wouldn't go so far as to say I'm indebted, but me being in the band had a lot to do with him. But if anything, he owes me for other things. And I'm not really sure what I'm sure he's happy that Josh and I are friends. I really don't know. What are some of the things that you and the Peppers tease each other about, or funny things that you guys joke about? We definitely don't tease each other anymore. That was something more years ago. It's but there's always lots of funny things, but they all just come up in the spirit of a moment or in the spirit of a long conversation, and I guess I can't really think of any running jokes, or if there are, I don't think they would seem funny if I told you about them. But I have not written any music with Vincent Gallo, but we will improvise some music together in England on April 3rd. This question is, what RHCP track are you most proud of? Seems like I like the B-sides a lot. I like the song Rivers of Avalon a lot, and I like the song Eskimo a lot, and off the Californication album I really love the song This Velvet Glove. I also really like the B-side from the Scar Tissue single, instrumental number 1, Gong Li off the same single. I hope someday we do a B-sides record, because I'm really, in a lot of ways, I'm more proud of our B-sides than I am of our album tracks. What do you think of Santa Monica? Santa Monica is where I first lived when I moved to California, so I love it there. I especially loved it at that time. I love the way the air feels down there, and I love being at the beach. I've actually been meaning to go there more often to run on the beach, because when we finished the By the Way tour, I stayed at a hotel in Santa Monica for a few days and ran on the beach, and I loved it so much. But I just it's kind of a whole day, going down there and stuff. And by the time you get back, it's so late in the day. But I love it there. When I was a little kid, it was a lot more dirty and kind of it wasn't as ritzy as it is now. But it was a great place to be a little kid, because I had all the role models who were like skateboarders and surfers and stuff. So I think I developed, I think, pretty important parts of my personality just because of being around those kind of people, and it was a good neighborhood for kids too. I lived at Euclid and Ocean Park Boulevard, right on the corner, in an apartment, and there was like about 10 little kids who lived within one block, and we would all get out there with our skateboards every day and skateboard down hills and stuff, and it was just a great place to be a little kid. This person asks how my dipping into technical chord and harmony structures lately affects my songwriting process. Is it more formulated, or does it rely mostly on jamming and improv? My songwriting process doesn't really rely on jamming or improvisation at all, at least not on Shadows Collide with People. It does with the Chili Peppers, and it actually has in other situations, but not on this album. I guess for a while I was really getting into figuring out ways of using more intervals in chords and things like that, and this comes through in a lot of the music on By the Way and on Shadows Collide with People. Lately it seems like I've been again going back to trying to get more just trying to get more out of using pretty simple chords, or using unusual chords in a with sort of finesse, with just kind of using just one or two during a song. I've been just trying to get back into just creating melodies that have depth and music that has a sort of a simplicity to it. That was just using big chords and trying to get richness out of harmony like that was just what I was into at that time a couple of years ago, and it was a really good experience for me, and I recommend it. It seems like a lot of songwriters really have, a lot of the time songs come from simply just trying to figure out a way to use a chord that you've never used before, or that you just found out about, and that's definitely where a lot of the music on those two records came from. This person asks why at the Performance 3 show, what caused me to walk off stage early. I didn't walk off stage that early. It was just that something seemed to be wrong with the synthesizer, and it turned out I looked at it afterwards and nothing was wrong with it, but the knobs were just set in kind of a funny place, and I didn't have the sense to be able, or the relaxation of mind to see clearly what was taking place, and it was just a matter of turning one knob, but at the moment of it happening I couldn't see it. And so I was just angry because I thought of that as being kind of the emotional peak of that particular song, was this big noisy synthesizer solo at the end, and when my synthesizer seemed to be making this big deep farting noise, and so I felt kind of like I couldn't do anything, so I walked off stage. But I had been really nervous throughout that show anyways, so I think it just all kind of culminated at that moment. But I think the main thing I felt bad about was just walking off stage and not saying thank you and stuff, but I tried to give back some good feelings the next night, and the next night ended up being a really, for me, just a real nice feeling show from beginning to end, despite a couple of mishaps and technical problems in the second show, but I didn't let them bother me the second time. And in general, and looking back on it, I question, was the second show better because of that, or was the first one actually better, even though I was in a worse, in a more nervous, state of mind. I think it's possible that the first one was better. I saw a little videotape clip of just a second of it, and it seemed much better than it felt to me on stage. So sometimes that nervousness, as unpleasant as it feels when you're going through it, sometimes it pushes you to do better. So, but yeah, it certainly had nothing to do with the audience or anything like that. I just walked off stage because I was nervous. But not to be forgotten that it was the end of the show anyways. All that was left to do was that synthesizer solo, and it didn't seem like the synthesizer was working, so that was that. This person asks, they're happy that I've turned them on to Captain Beefheart and Mars Volta and King Crimson. So, they ask if I have any recommendations I want to make for anyone new I've just discovered or I'm getting into. Well, as far as things I'd recommend to people, I can only say things that I think are really great, and I can't really completely recommend something because I don't know what a person's particular taste is or things like that. But some things that come to mind are some of the krautrock from Germany in the early 70s, Kraftwerk's first few albums, their first 3 albums, Neu! N-E-U, exclamation point, Michael Rother's solo albums, Michael Rother. There's a guy I like a lot called Francisco Lopez, who's an electronic experimental person. Eckhard Ehlers, E-H-L-E-R-S, which when you ask about in later question is, do I have any B-sides that are some of my favorites? And I like the one of us, it's called Tuesday Night in Berlin, with Eckhard Ehlers playing with us. He's playing his computer, and to me it was a really great live moment. I'm also really into the the progressive rock group called Vandergraaf Generator, and Robert Fripp from King Crimson plays a little guitar on a couple of their records. I've been really excited about them lately. There's also a group called Harmonia, and if you've never heard early Genesis when Peter Gabriel was the singer, if you like King Crimson, the same period of my life when I was 14 years old that I was obsessed with King Crimson, I was also obsessed with Genesis, the albums like Nursery Crime and Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and Foxtrot, and the guys in the Mars Volta are also really into that stuff, and they got into it through me when I met them. They hadn't heard it yet, and if you've never heard the Yes albums, Close to the Edge and Fragile, those are also really good progressive albums. And also I've been mentioning it a lot lately, but if you haven't heard me mention it, the guy named PITA, P-I-T-A. But, so no, Hillel never owned the Sunburst Strat that I used to have, but he did have a 71 Strat, so that's probably why you thought his looked similar. This person wants to know what my favorite ice cream flavor is. I don't eat ice cream anymore. I stopped eating it recently because the way I eat now is different, but I won't get into that. Back when I did eat ice cream, I guess some of the ice creams that stick out, like when I was a little kid, I really liked pralines and cream, at 31 Flavors, and I always occasionally liked to have, like pink bubblegum ice cream or something. And I also liked chocolate and peanut butter a great deal. I guess when I was a kid, it was 31 Flavors that I thought was the really good ice cream. In recent, I guess, a couple of years ago, if you would have asked me, my favorite thing to do was to take either vanilla frozen yogurt or vanilla rice dream ice cream and and take some carob chips and put them on a pan and heat them up, and then put the heated carob, like syrup is what it kind of becomes, on top of the ice cream, and eat it before the carob gets too hard. And that was really good. I liked that a lot. And I also liked the rice dream carob mint. What was it? Mint carob chip, I think is what it was called. But I stopped eating ice cream recently because the only things that I eat I don't eat anything that's made by anybody. I only eat things that are natural, like things like vegetables or meat or fish or eggs. Like I don't eat anything that has ingredients really. So that's why I don't eat ice cream. And the only only form of sugar that I eat is honey, and I don't eat any type of sweet anything. So that's the answer, but ice cream has definitely brought a lot of happiness into my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. God, this person asks, is there any chance of lyrics from The Sounds Inside being published on the website? But I don't know what From the Sounds Inside is. I'm very confused. So I don't know if that person could let me know, or maybe I'll figure out what you're talking. I'll ask Josh. Josh sometimes has a better head for these things, figuring things out than I do. But this person's also wondering what movies or artists I'm into at the moment, if any. Well, I just saw an incredible show of Cy Twombly when I was in Paris, and that was really good. But I really haven't been spending much time looking at art books or going to museums really. I guess I have a book of Diane Arbus photographs that I was looking at a lot about a month ago, and I saw a show of hers in New York, and that was really good. But for me lately, it's been mostly just listening to records over and over. I haven't been watching movies lately at all. I went through a period where I was watching movies every day, and I'm kind of relieved to not be going through a period like that anymore, because there's just, to me at the moment, there's just nothing better than just sitting here in my living room and listening to records and staring out the window. It's really like TV or movies. They just kind of make me antsy, or I don't know. They feel like, I'm glad. I think it's healthy that I'm going through a period like this, because I've been watching movies every day for, I'd been watching movies every day for like years, and I think I'm sure I'll go through a period again where I'm watching them all the time, but right now it feels good to just listen to music. So, but the last movies that I was really excited about were Godard movies and Fassbender movies, and Bergman movies as well. Ingmar Bergman. Those movies were the movies that were really exciting me a few months ago, right before I stopped watching movies. This person from Freeport, Long Island, they're explaining what they see in me when I'm playing guitar, and the question isn't really clear. I guess they say, I've always felt this translucent energy you emit when you play, and it's essentially overwhelming. Have you ever experienced this sort of sensation in any particular performance? They're asking, what is it that I feel when I play? It's hard to say. I think subconscious thought is really the thing that's most responsible for the expressions on my face and the way that I feel. All I'm thinking about is just the music and trying to just do something new with the music. And I've definitely found that playing music really doesn't get anywhere unless a person is really lost inside of it emotionally, and for that in that sense I think I play music with the same part of myself that I listen to records with when I'm sitting here at home. It's just the part of me that really gets excited about music and always has since I was a little kid, and that's the same part of me that propels me playing guitar on stage. I think the things that make one feel so intense about music are things that one isn't conscious of, and I think that's the way it should be, There was a time when I started to become conscious of these things that work for us as our subconscious, and all that really did was make me really take a much more technical view towards what I was doing. It made me start to be consciously sort of trying to play these games with light and dark, soft and hard, big and little, all these sort of combinations of things that do get us excited when we hear them in music, a verse being soft, for instance, and a chorus being loud or something like that. But you can't write songs or play guitar from any kind of a formula like that. You've got to just play from a feeling from your heart, and it can be interesting for a while, but in the end, trying to be too conscious of what it is that makes a piece of music great ends up just draining you of any desire to do it at all. So I try to just just close my eyes and just let the darkness sort of guide me, and I find that the less conscious thought that's put into anything is the better. If I am thinking of things consciously, it's just using my own knowledge of music to sort of to create dimension and to create space and things like that. But the thing that propels the music to develop in intensity is all things that I don't understand, and I'm glad that I don't understand them. Okay, well, the music that we've heard on your solo albums, is there a favorite track? I don't know, I like those last couple of songs on Usually Just a T-Shirt a lot. And I like the instrumental tracks on the new record a lot. And I guess I like Omission a lot because it was just something that Josh and I did together, and it was just a nice moment between friends. I like the song So Would Have I from the Internet album, which is also a B-side for the Going Inside single. Now, this question I don't understand. Is Lou Bergs, the writer Lou Bergs, or rather a being you've met somewhere? I don't know who Lou Bergs is. I don't know where you got that name. So, sorry about that. Do you think music is the key to the universe, or at least that as humans it's the only way we can understand it? I mean, the key implies that there's some kind of door that would be opened from it, and that would tell us everything about the universe. And I think that the doors that music opens for people are just personal doors to open up something inside of themselves. You know, to me, music's more a way of letting people discover what's inside of them, because the music that's outside before it reaches a person has no value at all. It's something that's in the air. But when it gets inside of a person, that's when it starts to mean multiple things and mean different things to different people, and that's really for me what it's been a key to. For me is just opening up so many doors inside of myself and getting such a deeper understanding of one's own ability to feel things, or to see colors inside, or to be able to sort of reassess one's feelings about the world around them, because for me it's pretty impossible to think negatively about anything about the world when it's the world that created it, all the music that's been created. Any pain or sadness or anything that's contributed to making the world what it is, contributed to making those songs what they are, and all that music what it is. And we're really lucky to live in a planet with so much music. We could be living in some bland planet that had no music, no movies, no books, just a bunch of people going around having jobs and things like that. And to me, that would be a really miserable place. You know, to me, music is what makes this world a really fun place to be. You know. They say they asked this because I've said that music flows through me from a language of spirits, so they were wondering if these spirits have the answers, and I'm trying to give them to the rest of the world. Well, they just have a certain way of thinking of things, you know, that I think a lot of musicians, whether consciously or unconsciously, have put ideas from other realms into music, and they make the world seem bigger to we as listeners. I think spirits do have a lot of the answers that people seek, but I don't think that people really want to know the things that they are seeking, because those things wouldn't help them to enjoy life anymore. They'd just ruin their lives. So I'm definitely not trying to give those answers to the world, because even were I to have them, I don't think that they would do the world any good. But I do try to put ideas that human beings have somehow just glanced over, because people are so concerned with I don't know, things like protecting themselves and making money and having jobs and being right and being accepted and all this kind of nonsense, that somebody like me who hasn't really concerned themselves with those things has as a result come across lots of ideas in my life that I feel like could be of use to people who have a similar way of living as I do. And I think that's why there was a time when spirits were sort of were talking through me and communicating with me was to get some of these ideas out to people. Question is, they say, I've noticed a few songs have a theme of rethinking your past, such as regret. I remember reading in past interviews that you weren't embarrassed about your heroin days, but are you feeling differently nowadays, as stated through these songs, or are you regretting something else? I don't regret anything. I haven't regretted anything for the last 5 years or so, but in 1997, there was a period of time where I was doing nothing but regretting all day long, every day. I was regretting to such an intense degree that I think I pretty much, what it came down to was I just regretted my whole life, you know. And to me, that's a pretty silly position to take mentally, is to regret your whole past, which is, it's just to wish you didn't exist, is basically what that is. You know, that's the logical extent of regret. You know, it's you know, that's taking it to its furthest degree. You know, and to me, any kind of thought that you take to its furthest degree should be something really interesting. You know, and just, you know, regretting that you exist is just meaningless. You know, so. The song "Regret" was really written in the spirit of nonsense, as a lot of my songs are, but as I think about it now, I think it probably has a lot to do with me just reflecting on that period of time where I was regretting everything, and hoping that the song sort of got across the contradiction in the statement, "I regret my past," because a lot of my lyrics have these sort of built-in contradictions within them, and the song, just to me, the sentence "I regret my past" is kind of a self-contradictory sentence. So there was definitely a time when I regretted everything, but my life could have never moved on, and I've noticed that people who regret things, the more time you spend regretting, as well as the more time you spend trying to protect yourself from the future or things like that, the more the less you actually accomplish anything in your life, and the less you actually do anything that moves you forward. And to me, I'm just interested in moving forward. I'm just interested in doing as many new things as I can, and you know, it's also a form of egomania to sort of focus on yourself so much, you know. Like, for me, I'm more interested in things I can do, you know. I'm not really interested in, like, could my life be better, or could the past have been better, or something stupid like that. Like, to me, it's more important, like, you know, how many songs can I record over the next year, and things like that, you know. You know, I wonder how many people I'll end up recording on other people's records with, or things like that. Like, those are things that seem interesting to me, you know. What records am I going to buy at the record store next time I go, or something? I mean, these to me, focusing on the past is a waste of time, and it'll only slow you down, you know. And same thing with protecting yourself from possible bad fates in the future or something. You're just slowing yourself down. You're better off going ahead and not worrying about anything bad that could possibly happen to you, and feeling feeling that the past was exactly the way it was meant to be, and it never could have been any other way. That's always an important thing to get clear in your head, because from the beginning of time till the end of time, things will only happen one way. There's no forks in that road. The beginning of time to the end of time happens from one straight line from the beginning to the end. So, millions of people throughout time have thought of it as this sort of, as these millions of little forks in the road, but those forks in the road were just in people's minds. None of them, they never actually existed, and things only happen exactly the way that they were meant to happen, and no other way. So, to me, when you have this clear in your head, you don't end up thinking about regretting things in the past, and you notice that your life starts moving faster and quicker, and you start accomplishing more things the less you are focused on rethinking the past or in protecting yourself. The next question, the last question from Lucas is, what are the names of your cats? I don't have any cats, but I used to have cats when I lived at 8505 Hollywood Boulevard. They belonged to me and my girlfriend at the time, Tony Oswald, but ever since we broke up, she has the cats, and their names are Pinky and Seren Sonata. Seren Sonata came from Ensenada, which was the mysterious old man who taught the residents his theory of phonetics and music, and had a great deal to do with their sound. We were just always listening to the residents back then, especially the first few albums, like Fingerprints and Meet the Residents and Not Available. So we named our cat Seren Sonata, and we put Seren, S-U-R, just as like the surreal and things like that. And also another thing in terms of the whole thing about protecting yourself, bad and regret. I think that a lot of people, including myself in the past, don't do things because you think, oh, that's bad luck or something, or that's going to bring about bad luck or things like that. But I think the only thing, or definitely part of the formula of somebody having bad luck, I believe, is to think of doing something and then to rethink it and avoid doing it, or to do something else. The best thing is to just go forward and always do something when you think of doing it, and don't rethink and don't question what your instinct is, but just to follow your heart and to follow your instinct and to just move ahead. And when you have a thought, don't second guess yourself. Just go ahead and do exactly what you've intended to do. Just like playing a first take, in a guitar solo or something. You just roll with the feeling, and you don't stop in the middle of it and reconsider or something. You just play the solo, so. This person asks, so they mentioned that I've been using my handwriting a lot lately, and they're wondering why. It says, have you got any reasons? And it also says, sorry, this is not a music-related question, which is definitely fine. These don't have to be music-related questions. I kind of enjoy the ones that aren't. The reason I like using my handwriting is because a person's personality comes through in their handwriting in all kinds of ways, and I think when you see somebody's handwriting, you learn a lot about them. I know, for instance, even though I can't read Italian, I love looking at Leonardo da Vinci's handwriting. It's so beautiful, and so much of everything there is in him, in his paintings and in his drawings and in his thoughts, I see it all there in his handwriting, and I think to a degree, I feel the same. I see the same. I feel like I see my music in my handwriting. You know, to me, my handwriting looks like my music does. And so that's the reason. Okay, here's this question about why don't you play material from One Hot Minute? And they're hoping that I give a different answer because it's a John to fan response rather than a John to magazine interview response. For me, magazine interviews are to fan interviews. You know, I don't think of it as the interviewer that I'm talking to in most cases. I realize that it's a communication with the fans, but anyways, so part of this is a repetition of what I've always said, which is that what I've heard of that album I don't like, and you've got to understand what it feels like to be to be a member of a group, and then and to have a very perfectly balanced chemistry, and then to hear somebody else come in where that chemistry isn't balanced anymore. It just sounds so off to me, you know, and I don't think it would sound that way to anybody else to the degree that it does to me. You know, I experienced the same thing recently, I think, with playing, and never mind, I won't say that. But you know, it's just, I have a problem with music that's made because people are in a successful band, and not because they actually had to make the music. You know, like when I feel like somebody makes music because that's what their record contract says to do, I just have a problem with that. You know, and for me, a record like that was made it was very forced. You know, it wasn't something they would have just done as a group of friends. It was something they did because they were a very successful rock group. And I personally have a problem listening to music like that. Like when I feel like somebody's doing it because it's what they're contractually obligated to do it, and when it sounds like that, it's just, you know, and for me, that's what that album is. I'm sorry to put it down, but it's no different. You know, I'm sure you wouldn't like every album that I like. I mean, I like a lot of music I'm sure you wouldn't like, and so in the case of One Hot Minute, it's just something that it just doesn't appeal to me, you know, and you know, the whole thing, and nobody, and to top it off, nobody, Chad nor Flea nor Anthony is really proud of that album either. So actually, I'm not sure about Chad, but I know Flea and Anthony, you know, they like some things on it, but they don't really think very highly of the album, and they would have been fine if they had never made it, you know, and so they don't really push the issue. You know, they say, I'd like to do some of the songs, but only if you really wanted to, and I don't really want to, so that's the answer. Sorry if I'm cold about it, but that's just the way I feel. Okay, this person asks 3 questions. One of them is, John, have you ever written a love song? Yeah, I've written a certain amount of love songs. It seems like sometimes the more sort of, when they get kind of mushy, especially after I'm not with the person anymore, they sound, actually they just start to sound like not something I'd want to release. And then also it seems like I seem to enjoy the songs that are more about a doomed relationship, or about that we're going to, that there's no way for us to go but to break up, things like that. I've recorded some songs like that recently that'll be on future records. You know, it's I definitely write about people, and I guess I prefer love songs that are written in a sort of a surreal way. I'm not as big on it when it's just straight love songs, but there is actually some songs that I've written that are kind of straight-ahead love songs that I just would never release them, you know. It's some of my songs I could imagine like some, like, you know, pop singer doing or something. They could probably have a hit with them, but I just could never bear to do that sort of thing. You know, I've felt that way before, and I've written songs like that, but I like throwing in like certain, like a line here and there that's a direct, like that's a direct you know, statement directed at somebody, but I like for it to be sort of clouded in a lot of surreal sort of you know, painting a picture type lyrics. So and then the next question is, your music is all about purity, but it doesn't seem like you write about people much. Are you interested in people? I guess I'm interested in what's inside of people. I feel like a certain amount of my songs, I feel like, are letters to people. A lot of the time I'm trying to communicate things to people about outside worlds and things like that, or just things that I figured out from having such a big period of my life where I was going so deep inside myself that I ended up seeing things that I would have never seen if I was living in the real world all the time, like most people. And so I try to communicate these things through my words. So I feel like the whole reason for me writing words in general is, at this point, has a lot to do with communicating with people. But I suppose I'm not really interested in writing like lyrics about, like, you know, Jack Destry works at a bank and things like that, like, you know, or even really Beatles type lyrics where you're telling a story about this person or that person that works at the carnival or whatever. I'm not. I'm more interested in writing about what my own experience and what I've felt and the things I've seen, and I like doing a sort of cut-ups of my life where there's a thought from when I was 5 years old, followed by something I realized yesterday, followed by something I'm thinking about tomorrow, or something that I dreamed 5 years ago, or, you know, I like making songs be a sort of a collage of all sorts of different thoughts. To me, it's all really human, and I think in the music that I've made since the time of Shadows Collide with People, it just keeps going more and more in a raw sort of human direction, and but definitely usually when I have as far as it goes back to the love song question, always when I have girlfriends, there's always songs that were directed at that girl, but I just don't, for me it doesn't feel like enough to just write a straight ahead love song. As much as I love the lyrics of music in the 50s and stuff, when songs were pretty much all about love or sex disguised as love or whatever, but I love those kind of lyrics, you know. I love all the really I guess maybe what some people would think of as being real, like, corny or whatever. I love those kind of lyrics, and as an exercise, sometimes I do try to write something that doesn't have any surreal talk in it. You'll hear some in the future. But a lot of the time, it seems like they're more sad songs about that I know I can't go through with this relationship, things like that. but they are very direct and to somebody in that way. But the love songs, the songs that ended up being directed at girlfriends are like one girlfriend, the song "Running Away Into You" on my first solo record. I always thought of that as being a song to her, and my last girlfriend, the song "Every Person," I thought of as being to her. But a lot of the time that's not what the whole song amounts to, because at the same time that's not really what your feelings about somebody amount to. They're not really about just that person. They're about things going on inside of yourself. They're about your whole life leading up to that point. Your feelings about a person are never really the whole picture. So I guess that's why I wouldn't want to write a whole song just about my feelings on one person in that one-dimensional way. To me, if you bring other concepts into the same song, you're actually giving a more complete image of your feelings for that person anyways. And then the other question from that person is, John, do you think that dedicating your life to making music is enough? Well, that's the only thing that I'm good at, so that's really, whether it's enough or not, it's all I can really do. But, you know, I don't think that that's all I do. For instance, I think that, you know, my friendships with the people who I'm friends with, hopefully I bring something nice into their life that has nothing to do with the fact that I play music, but it's just because I'm here and I'm myself and I'm who I am. And so, and I know that my friends, that's how they affect me. My friend Josh Klinghoffer, my friends Omar Rodriguez, if they didn't play music at all, if it was just our friendship alone, that would, hold on, the phone's ringing. So even if my friends, you know, just our friendship alone, it makes a big difference to me in my life. And but it seems like I'm closest to people when we have that connection with music as well. Yeah, I guess you're talking about the possibility of, you know, dedicating my life to some sort of a spiritual quest or something, but for me music is that, you know, for me music's the closest to that I'm capable of or really feel like is my calling. I mean, you know, it's I feel like what I'm doing with music does other things besides just people buy the music and they hear it. I feel like just the creation of music does things to other planes of existence that, though we're not aware of them here, we're interacting with them all the time, and so I think we I think the people who make music are creating worlds out there and things like that, and so and helping, you know, you have certain factions of spirits and things like that who are working for certain causes, and you have other ones working for other causes, just like you do here on the planet, where some people are working for beauty and some people are working for money. And I think you have spirits, you know, doing the same, what's the equivalent of the same thing in their realm. And so I just think the more powerful the people who are really living their lives to make something beautiful, the more of us that there are, and the more beautiful what we make is, the more powerful those spirits are. And that's really, like, for me, that's the biggest part of my reasons for making music here. You know, it's definitely not, you know, to make myself successful or something. It's because my understanding of those realms was put into me during the 5 years that I wasn't doing anything, and I was made to see what's going on out there very clearly. And I just know how important it is for all of them out there who have helped me so much for me to keep creating as much as I can. So I'm just trying to do the best I can at it. And for me to keep my life simple and focused on one thing like that is the best thing I can do. There would be no point to, devoting myself to skiing or, any other kind of physical activity or any other profession or anything. For me, music is the spiritual quest anyways. This question is, do you ever listen to the band Phish? I still haven't heard them, but I met their guitar player, who was really nice. I'm forgetting his name now, but if I wasn't so lazy, I'd go over to my address book and look it up, because I know I've still got his phone number. They seem really cool. That I know he was telling me that they do the whole Talking. They did the whole Talking Heads album, Remain in Light, live, and they do that here and there. Like they'll play a whole album. He said they played the Velvet Underground Loaded album, and I thought that seemed really cool. It seemed really fun to do and fun to witness, and I certainly love the idea of people just going up there and jamming for long periods of time. It seemed like a really fun existence those guys have, and I've been, when he sparked my curiosity in it, but I hadn't really thought about it that much since then. But I suppose I should buy. He told me I should buy one of their live albums if I was to hear them, which I'm sure I'll do one of these days soon. I really liked him as a guy. He was really nice. And then the other question is, do you see the Chili Peppers or yourself getting deeper into improvisational territory? Yeah, we definitely have in the, like for instance, on the Californication tour, we had just started doing like sort of real noisy sort of endings for shows. The first couple that we even did, we released as B-sides of End of Show Brisbane and End of Show State College. And, it was, and then on the By the Way tour, we really started getting deep into that, sometimes improvising as much as like 50 minutes, 50 minutes at the end of performances. And, we throw little improvisations into the show, but with us, there's kind of a balance that we have to have, because Anthony, while he is definitely one of the few singers that really does improvise with us. A lot of singers have a hard time improvising words and stuff, and he's really good at it, but I guess, especially when it comes to improvising where there's soloing and a lot of intense interaction rather than repeating a groove, when the improvisation is constantly changing, sometimes it starts to become more instrumentally oriented, and at which point Anthony starts, whoa! Fuck. Sorry, I won't explain what just happened, but that was just a real crisis, but it's all right now. Oh God. What was I saying? Yeah, so Anthony is, so it's just something that we have to, find a middle ground for, improvisation is the whole way that our music comes about, and so, and it's something that I would say all four of us are really deeply into, but, and as far as doing it on stage, we do it a lot, but to do it to the degree that someone like Phish does it, see, Phish doesn't have a lead vocalist from what I remember from my conversations with that guy. They all play instruments, and a number of them sing, so in Anthony's case, while we're improvising, he has to just be kind of standing around waiting, and for him, he starts to kind of lose his flow from just standing around. he does support us by dancing and things like that, but there's only so much a guy can do before he starts to feel like he's not really part of what's going on. So that's the difference in a band like Phish. They all play instruments, so they all have nobody's left out when there's no vocal. And improvisational music is largely about being instrumental. Even if you have a vocalist who can improvise, you wouldn't want to just hear that for a whole hour or whatever, whereas instrumental music can go on for 3 hours and it's great. So that's the answer to that. This person asks, did you have a guitar teacher? Oh, this person's name is John Orme. Did you have a guitar teacher when you were younger? And how long did you have lessons? They say, I want to be a guitarist, but I don't think I'm going the right way about it. Yeah, for a while I just sort of bounced from guitar teacher to guitar teacher, never really feeling like I'd found the right one. Because we wouldn't share the same opinions on things. I think my first guitar teacher told me that Joe Pass was better than Jeff Beck. And I thought, I'd never heard of Joe Pass, but I said, better than Jeff Beck. Wow, I didn't think anybody was better than Jeff Beck. And then I saw a picture of Joe Pass, and I and I realized, like, all right, this guy's not better than Jeff Beck, or this guy's just speaking on a different level than the way I'm thinking of music, because for me, music had a lot to do with the excitement of rock, and this guy was talking about a jazz guitarist. So, and actually, I think I might have had a guitar lesson just before that. The guy just didn't know punk at all, and punk was the main thing that I was into. So, I only had one lesson from him, and then I had another teacher who. He seemed to know, like, I guess he liked Yes, and I liked Yes a lot, and so he knew how to play a few Steve Howe things or something, but he also didn't like punk, so I had a few lessons from him, but he just wasn't good for me all the way around. Then I met this guy named Mark, who he had played in a band that Nina Hagen had that she broke up shortly there before they ever went out on tour or recorded anything. But Pat Smear, the guitarist of the Germs, was also in this lineup with him. So this guy played guitar with Pat Smear at one point, which to me was a very impressive credential, even if they hadn't actually ever made a record or anything like that. The fact that he thought Pat was a good guitarist, for me, automatically, like, made him really cool. And then he had made all these recordings that I really liked at the time, and his full name was Mark Metcalf, and I guess he's made recordings under the name Mark 9. I've never followed any of his recordings. I liked what he had done, these demos that he had done around that time when I was taking lessons around 1983, 84, and he was really a good teacher, and a lot of the time lessons would consist of me asking questions like, how does Jimi Hendrix get this really high feedback right here, or how does a recording studio work, or what does a sequencer do, or he would answer all these questions, and he was actually the first person who ever brought me up on stage. We played his band Underworld, not the same Underworld that's called Underworld nowadays, but he had a band called a sort of a psychedelic, a modern psychedelic band, I guess I would call them, called Underworld, and they played a gig at the Lhasa Club in Hollywood or in LA somewhere, and I played guitar on one song, and it was I was 14 years old, and I really got, it was a real song a guitarist could sink his teeth into, because it started out with these real sort of soft ambient parts, and then it built to, it was a 60s song called Mr. Blue, a psychedelic song, and then it had like fast punk part, like a part that sped up to punk rock speed, and then broke down into like real slow real slow drums with me doing lots of feedback and stuff, and there was like 2 long guitar solos, and it was really a great way to start out performing, and I just looked up to him a great deal. And he kept raising the price of lessons, so eventually my mom said we didn't have the money to pay for it anymore. And then he was kind of when I joined the band, he gave me his advice on what was wrong with my playing when he saw me live, without me really asking him what was wrong with it. Or, he started like acting like we were in the middle of a lesson, and it was kind of weird because he auditioned for the Chili Peppers when I was 14, and he didn't get into the band, and I did get into the band, but he was telling me how I should play, and I just thought, I just resented that, and I haven't spoken to him since. But and I don't really speak about him much in interviews because I just thought he was such a jerk that, why should I give him props? But he actually was a really good teacher, and if you would have asked me about him when I was 14, I would have said he was the living end. I just loved him, and his opinions meant everything to me, and I thought of him as being one of my favorite guitarists and all that. I think it's great if you can find a guitar teacher who's really who really thinks along the same lines as you in general, or who you really respect not only as a teacher but as a musician. I think if you're lucky enough to find somebody like that, it can really help. Otherwise, I think it's good to just bounce from teacher to teacher. I think even though I was sad when I had to stop taking lessons from him, I think I made a certain kind of I learned a lot just from not only from teaching myself things and trying to just motivate myself to learn things. Like I actually spent a couple of years just focusing on the stuff that he had taught me, just learning it better, just getting it deeper into my head. I think I probably learned more from the lessons I took with him after I stopped taking lessons from him than before, because I still had all the pieces of paper, and I just went deeper into the information and started applying it more. You can, but even if you don't find a teacher that you like, if you find somebody who can at least show you, if you want to go this direction, if somebody who can show you chord theory and explain how what the intervals are, and maybe even understanding how to read music, to see the way music is written on page really I think is a real healthy thing for your brain. Even if you don't sight read on your instrument, to at least understand the way that music can be translated into a written language is really helpful. For instance, Flea, he knew how to read music on the trumpet from when he was a little kid, but he just never actually sat there and read any music on his bass. But the fact that he knew how music was written would help us in our songwriting a lot, because when we're explaining rhythms to each other, we can say, it's a dotted eighth note followed by a quarter note or something. We can speak that way to make our ideas more cemented into each other's heads, and it just helps. It's the language of music, so it helps to know how to write it. You can also, I also think that it can be just as good to go the other route and to not learn things from a theoretical standpoint, but to just learn things based on feeling them and based on learning things by ear and things like that. For me, that's the kind of guitar player I wanted to be. I wanted to just be able to have no limitations. I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted to do, whatever I was interested in doing. So for me, that meant being able to do all these things, reading music as well as knowing theory, as well as learning things by ear, as well as just playing by feelings. You know, I mean, it's always playing by feelings, but a lot of the time I think the understanding theory and all these things can help you get all these ideas out quicker. For instance, if you were making up a harmony part to something, if you played guitar, yeah, you can just go by feel, whatever that would mean. For me, I automatically know where the third is and where the fifth is, and for me, making a harmony to something is pretty much just following the dots. It's not, I don't have to depend on luck, and I don't have to depend on somebody who plays by feel. When they're coming up with things like harmonies, they're depending on kind of luck, and I just don't like to leave it in the hands of that. For me, luck is going to be like whether the whole thing is good or not, but not whether I'm capable of coming up with a harmony. For me, it really helps to automatically know, you know, where the next harmony goes, and where the one higher than that goes, and where the one higher than that goes. And I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't know theory. So I recommend that strongly, and I also just recommend spending your time just trying to learn things by ear, and that means starting with whatever's the simplest kind of music that you really like, whether it's, you know, the Ramones or the Bay City Rollers or the Shags or something. Whatever the simplest thing is that you like, that's the stuff you should be figuring out first, and you should, you know, gradually work your way up to eventually being able to learn the most complex things that you like. And I highly recommend evenly dividing your time between these different practices, whether it's, you know, spending a certain amount of time on scales, a certain amount of time on chords, a certain amount of time on reading music, a certain amount of time on just playing to a metronome in order to get faster, and to make your sense of time better, a certain amount of time learning things off of records, a certain amount of time, you know, jamming with people, you know, a certain amount of time recording, you know, for me, once you get to a level where you're adequate in each one of these areas, then you can find a way for yourself to be spending, you know, 8 hours a day playing or 10 hours a day playing. But even practicing a half hour every day or an hour every day, I would say you can still get pretty far. But to me, if you want to be at a certain level of guitar playing, you've got to practice more than that. You know, you got to be the kind of guy that just wants to sit there all day playing guitar. But it just depends on how high your sights are set. You know, like I said, I think a person can make a lot of progress if they just make sure they do it every day. Like, for instance, I'm in the process of learning mathematics right now, and I don't, because I do music so much, there's actually a lot of days I don't even do it. But when I do it, you know, I do it like an hour and a half, sometimes as little as a half hour. And, you know, I've made a lot of progress in the last few months, and I think it's the same with any endeavor. You know, I think if you just make sure you do it consistently, that you'll make progress doing it. But, you know, a good teacher will help, but I know a lot of people who have never taken a lesson and who have wonderful styles, you know. This person says, when do you find yourself most able to be creative, and how do you maintain it in order to best capture that creative spark? And they say they were wondering this because, I quote, I don't play anything, but sometimes I have a hard time keeping my grasp on what it is I'm trying to put down in physical when I'm drawing it from what is in my mind. Thank you. Okay, as far as when do I find myself to be most able to be creative, it's just basically when I'm alone, you know. Unless I'm being creative with other people, if it's if it's playing with a group or jamming with a friend or something, or recording with a friend. But as far as writing songs and really translating whatever I'm seeing in my mind, there can't be anybody talking on the phone in the background or washing the dishes in the background or anything like that. I have to be in silence, by myself, because in making music, the process is basically you're sitting there and you're hearing music even though there's no music playing, and it's your job to put it into the air, And I think in your field with drawing, it's the same thing. A person who draws, they see something even though there's nothing in front of them, and then they make it their job to put it in front of them. I guess in as far as when from what I've read about people who draw, like somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, he really made it his practice to really be able to as perfectly reflect what he saw around him in the world as he could. And I know somebody like Van Gogh did the same thing. And for me, these artists are the sort of people that a person should be taking their cues from. And these people, they would sit there and just draw tree after tree after tree, and draw, landscape after landscape. And Leonardo da Vinci would sit there and draw as many kinds of noses as he could think of, or as he would see around him. He'd sit there at a cafe and just look at different people, and he could draw 1,000 noses and not draw two of them the same. He had it broken down into there are this many types of noses. He knew exactly, and he had a big list of exactly how many types of noses there were, and then within that, I'm sure you have subcategories of other kinds of noses. This is in his notebook somewhere or other. I can't remember where, but for me, you've really got to break apart reality into these subdivisions, and for me, only this way are you really going to be able to translate what you see in your head, because your brain will start to have a sharper connection with what is what the visible is. When you just look around, you're taking in too many things subconsciously. You're not conscious of enough. So unless you're drawing everything you see around you all the time, you can't really expect to be able to see something in your head and automatically understand the technical ramifications of what it is that you saw and be able to translate it onto a piece of paper. You just can't expect to do it any more than I could expect to turn around right now, look at the plants sitting behind me, and expect to be able to just draw them. Things appear in your mind too quickly, and you've got to have a certain sort of technical foundation to be able to really grasp them clearly enough when you get these little glimpses of them to be able to put it on paper, So that's why for me with music, I sit there and I learn every type of guitar playing that I can get my hands on, I've got to change the battery. Yeah, so that's why I've spent so much time learning things off records and things like that, is because if I get an idea to write a sad song, I've in my lifetime learned probably thousands of sad songs that I have as a basic template for understanding what it means to write a sad song, and what your options are, and what the various directions that one can go are. And when I hear a sound in my head, or I hear a melody in my head, I know immediately what the technical process is to achieve those feelings, because I've seen feelings like them before in a technical form. So that's my recommendation to you, is to just draw everything in sight. And I think don't expect to be able to draw everything that's in your head right away. First you've got to just draw the things that you see around you. This is from somebody named Matt. They basically just want to know if I will do a tour for some album in the future. Yeah, I'm by the time the Chili Peppers finish the cycle of our next record, I will have another few albums out, and by that point, there will be a lot of music to choose from, and Josh and I have already been talking about the concept of putting a band together and actually, doing a real proper tour, of which England would definitely be a lot of it, because we both really love it there. So that's definitely, it's something that's definitely eventually going to happen. It's just a question of when the Chili Peppers cycle of next album then tour happens. Right now I've just been spending all my time recording, and we could have done a tour, but we thought we'd do these. We've been doing all these experimental shows here in LA, and we just wanted to record as much music as we could, and of which we've recorded a lot. This question is, can you tell me something about the process of how you pick a certain guitar for a certain piece of music? I already answered this question, sort of, but I'll try to answer it a slightly different way. Sometimes the guitar that a person plays is what dictates the piece of music to begin with, But a lot of the time it's just a feeling, but there's such a subtle difference between the guitars that I've really used up to this point, with the exception of the White Falcon, which I would only play a White Falcon on something that didn't really require much bending strings or much vibrato or things like that, because I have really thick strings on my White Falcon, and so I play it on something that would require that thick string sound. But as far as the Telecaster and the Stratocaster is a little thinner. My Telecaster is a little. This isn't always this way, but in my case, my Stratocasters are both a little thinner than my Telecaster. They're both very similar, but the Telecaster has a little thicker of a sound. So if I want a clean sort of a sound, but I still want it to cover a little more of a sonic range, then I'd play the Telecaster. If I want it to be smaller, I'd play the Stratocaster I have with the white neck, and it just depends on how. It just depends on how hard I want to go. But sometimes I just don't have a choice. Like on the last album that I made, which you haven't heard yet, there's a Telecaster. The Telecaster was what I was hoping I was going to do everything on, but my Telecaster ended up having really bad intonation when we were in the studio. We were noticing that it was sounding out of tune when I would play up around the 7th fret. So I ended up doing everything on the Strats, and they sounded just as good. I really don't think that the guitar is actually that important, For me, it's more about the way a person plays it, You can have two people play the same instrument and it sounds nothing the same, it has more to do with what's in somebody's hands and what's inside their heart, and I'm sure their nerves and their musculature and all these things go into making their guitar sound the way it does, If you hand Mark Bolan a guitar, it wouldn't sound the same as if you handed Robert Fripp the same guitar. It's just, it wouldn't be the same instrument at all. So to me, and they both play Les Pauls actually, so that shows you, it just really doesn't matter. It's about the human being, This person's wondering what effects I add to the guitar to make those interesting textural sounds, and how you practice as a singer getting a bigger range. I'm not sure which textural. I wish I could answer exactly which textural sounds you're talking about, because I don't know what you're referring to. I would tell you exactly how I got a sound if you told me which performance you were talking about, or which song you were talking about, or something. But I guess since I don't have that, I'll just tell you a couple that I like that I found recently. One that I found recently that I really like, which I've used on Omar Rodriguez's solo album, which will eventually come out, and I also did it live at a performance in in San Diego, opening for Blonde Redhead. Just using this Electro-Harmonix electric mistress effects, and then using this DoD analog delay that Omar had, or that Omar has, but that I'm borrowing right now. I turned off the original signal, and had an echo that, maybe like, I don't know, like half a second long or something, or maybe a little longer, and set it to one repeat or maybe a couple of repeats, and it, for some reason with this DoD delay, it completely takes away the attack of the note, which is something you can also do on the synthesizer. You can send a gate from an external input to an ADSR, which can control a VCA, and you can get rid of the attack of a note, and that automatically creates a real non-guitar-like texture, because part of the timbre of a guitar is the attack, and when it's not there anymore, it really doesn't sound much like a guitar anymore, and between that electric mistress and the DoD pedal, and I was also using the Holy Grail reverb pedal by Electro-Harmonix, and turn that almost all the way up, and you get all kinds of feedback kind of sounds, but and when you play chords and you play high notes within the chords, everything just sort of sounds like it's a cloud. It ceases to be chords and melodies anymore. It just starts to be this real kind of cloudy, colorful, like bursts of color. It's just really a good sound. I was so happy when I discovered it. Me and Omar and Cedric were just like, what is that sound? Like, how did that happen, And it's a really good piece of music that Omar put together for that song. Brilliant singing from Cedric on it. I hope you hear it. And let's see. Some other. I like running my guitar through my synthesizer. There's all kinds of interesting things that a person can do with filters and with distortion, and I'm talking about like the kind of distortion that a person can add, sort of not so much from a distortion pedal, but just from overdriving it going through a synthesizer. I have this analog Dope4 modular synthesizer. It's you can get such great distortion out of it. It's nothing like a distortion pedal. It's much more sort of unnatural sounding, and that's a good textural sound. As far as practicing as a singer and getting a big range, it's I have a vocal teacher named Ron Anderson who's a really great vocal teacher. He teaches Bjork. He's very expensive, but he really knows what he's talking about. And even if a person saves up for one lesson with him, that one lesson can really change your singing forever. And you record it and you practice that one lesson for a long time, and I've he's just really made the hugest difference. I just feel like I owe him so much. He's really done wonderful things for me, and it also just comes from working at it all the time. I mean, I sit there and sing along with records all the time, and a few years ago my singing I felt like was at like the lowest point it had ever been at in my life, but it was just because I hadn't worked on it, and I just had to really put the time into it. So it's the same way with anything. You just have to do it a lot. I guess I spent a lot of time practicing singing harmonies with Josh. We would stay up till 6, 7 in the morning, singing harmonies to Beatles songs all night, and I would listen to like Queen records or whatever, and I guess this is something you can only do if you already have kind of a good ear from playing an instrument, but I would sing along with, I'd listen to the harmonies, and I'd sing along with one harmony part, and then I'd go back to the beginning of the song and sing along with the next harmony part, and then sing along with the next one, and I think that really helped me to be able to get a better idea of how to sing in harmony. This question is, do you think you'll release Omar, Flea, and prog rock songs on a label, or just put them on the internet? I'll release them on a I think I probably answered a question like this one before, but I'll try to answer it a different way. John, where did you get all your inspiration for making music? Where do you get all your inspiration for making and creating music from? God, it's hard to say. There's for me, like, there's so much music everywhere. Like, when I look in the sky, or when I look at a tree, or when I look at, somebody who I love's face or something. It's just, for me, I see music in all these things, and these things that make me love life are the same things that make me love music. I feel like, during the period of my life where I hated everything, I feel like I also was unable to really make music. For me, a person has to really be has to take pleasure in the littlest things, and you shouldn't be down on yourself if you don't take pleasure in the littlest things. If sometimes, like I say, I've gone through huge periods of really disliking everything about existence, and during those periods of time, I think that they were part of what helped me to eventually be able to really love everything about existence. So, it's just something, whatever you're feeling is something you have to go through, but definitely, I would say, to expect to be able to really do any artistic endeavor with a great deal of feeling, a person has to really really see the beauty that's in everything around them. There's also just that through a great deal of interaction with people who are living elsewhere other than the planet Earth, I feel like they've given me lots of incentive to be able to they've given me lots of incentive to want to make a lot of music, because I see that it goes further than just recording a piece of music and then selling it on a CD and then somebody buying it and listening to it, because there's lots of spirits inside every person who listens to it that also hear the music when that person listens to it. And this is a big part of the reason why people feel so much when they listen to music, is because they're not the only ones hearing it when they're hearing it. And for me, this is a thought that really makes it extra worthwhile to make music. If I'm playing music to a crowd, I'm not only playing music to the people there, but to all the spirits inside all of those people. And to me, that gives me extra motivation to really want to be good at what I do, and to really just to be the best I can be at what I do. But yeah, I think creativity and inspiration come from really accepting everything as it is, and really not only accepting it, but really embracing everything the way it is, being so happy that we live in a world that has that's as well balanced as this one is, you know. Yeah.